I returned home for the quarterly board meeting, technically a family formality, but structured like a corporate event. We all wore name tags. My father called it branding. I called it theater. I arrived at the Oak Ridge house, not late, but not early either. Enough to be polite, enough to show I still played by the rules. The room smelled like catered coffee and old ambition. My father was at the head of the table, adjusting his tie as if preparing for a courtroom deposition. My brother-in-law hovered over the projector like a nervous intern. My sister sat 3 seats away from me. She hadn't made eye contact in months. It was mid-presentation Dad's baritone voice discussing Q2 numbers when I noticed something strange on the screen. My name was missing. Under the executive leadership slide where it used to say, Clara Wells, Managing Partner, Strategy and Operations, it now read, Position currently under review. No warning, no context. Just a quiet erasure in Arial bold. I turned slightly. My sister leaned toward me, not looking directly. Her lips barely moved. They took your title, she hissed. I blinked once. Not from shock I'd learned not to show that, but from the realization that the play had ended, and I was no longer part of the cast. I didn't flinch. I didn't whisper back. I just picked up my notepad, clicked my pen, and wrote the words, Final notice. The room moved on, or tried to. Dad continued talking like nothing had shifted, but I saw the tremor in his hand when he clicked to the next slide. The timeline for the upcoming expansion didn't include me either, nor did the HR org chart. I looked around. No one met my eyes. Not Mom, who sat stiffly with a clipboard as if she were just another board member. Not Aunt Lillian, who always claimed to be neutral, but conveniently looked down at her tea when things got tense. Only Rachel, my sister, had dared to speak. Later, in the hallway, I asked no one in particular, was there a vote? No one answered. But my brother-in-law coughed twice. That was enough. I stood still for a long moment, watching my own reflection in the polished glass of the conference room. I was wearing the navy blazer I'd bought in Boston after landing the Shell account. That deal alone had tripled our client base in 2019. The blazer still fit perfectly. Apparently, that wasn't enough to stay in the room. I didn't confront them. Not yet. I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a cup of the lukewarm coffee, and sat at the edge of the granite island, like a guest in a house I used to own. They thought I would yell, that I would defend myself, maybe even cry. But silence is heavier than noise, and when deployed right, it makes people nervous. My father didn't speak to me for the rest of the day. My mother hugged me goodbye, but too quickly, like she didn't want it on record. Rachel sent me a text 3 hours later. I didn't agree with it, just so you know. I didn't reply. That night, I went home to my apartment, the one I paid for entirely from performance bonuses and early client equity. I opened my laptop, logged into the internal dashboard, and checked the executive permissions. Revoked. My admin access was gone. The strategy portal I had built line by line over 4 years now required additional authorization. That's when it became real. They hadn't just changed a slide. They had rewritten the foundation. But here's what they forgot. I was the one who built the system they just used to cut me out. And systems remember, even when people pretend not to. It wasn't always like this. 10 years ago, when Dad first floated the idea of turning the family name into a formal enterprise, I was the only one who showed up with a spreadsheet. Everyone else brought opinions. I brought a plan. We called it Wells and Company. But it was me who opened the first bank account, me who stayed up nights drafting our original charter, me who cut the ribbon on our first contract in a damp converted basement we called the headquarters. My parents insisted on making Adam, my younger brother, the public face, said he had the charm. I didn't argue. I never did. I told myself it didn't matter who got the photo if I owned the copyright. The title didn't matter either, not then. I was head of strategy on paper, but in practice I did everything that didn't get applause. I stayed late to fix invoices, rewrote client pitches at 2 a.m., drafted legal documents when we couldn't afford a lawyer. When Rachel's husband lost his job and they needed help with rent, I rewrote the compensation structure to create room for a temporary payroll bump. When Mom wanted a home office renovation, I pulled funds from my personal bonus pool and labeled it under Executive Wellness Initiative. I didn't tell anyone, I never needed to. They just assumed things got done, and somehow, I was always the one who did them. In 2016, when Dad had a minor heart episode, it was me who took over his day-to-day without a title change, without compensation. I ran point on 3 active projects, trained a new operations manager, and onboarded 2 interns while handling his insurance paperwork on the side. He called me kiddo and promised we'd talk about promotion after the dust settles. It never did. When Rachel had her twins in 2018, I reorganized the meeting calendar to accommodate her leave, sent her weekly summaries, and even hired a part-time assistant for her using my discretionary budget. The company flourished, and the family didn't fall apart. But no one asked what it cost me. I gave up 2 vacations, a relationship, and any semblance of a work-life balance. I signed away stock options to smooth over a tense board vote, cut my own salary 1/4 to keep payroll stable. When I moved apartments, I chose one closer to the office so I could open early and close late. I ate breakfast at my desk. I memorized the espresso machine error codes because Dad refused to call a technician. I learned to be indispensable in a way that didn't draw attention, because that's what they needed, someone dependable, invisible, tireless. I was all 3, but I wasn't naive. Over the years, I kept records. Not for revenge, for sanity. I archived every process document I built from scratch, saved every email thread where I resolved vendor disputes, navigated legal gray zones, and absorbed blame to protect the family's reputation. I had folders labeled original drafts, unapproved edits, contracts, my version, and approved, their edits. It was like watching my own ghost work accumulate over time, proof that I was real, even if no one ever said thank you. When I asked for a formal vote in 2021 to restructure the equity pool, Dad said it was not the right time. When I asked for a clear succession plan in case something happened to him, he said, "Let's not borrow trouble." When I brought up vesting schedules for the younger team, Rachel said, "Why complicate things? We trust each other." But trust, I've learned, is the currency of the comfortable. For people like me, the ones doing the math, keeping the lights on, it's a liability. Still, I kept going. Not because I was afraid of losing the company, but because I thought if I just worked hard enough, long enough, they would see me, not just as a daughter or a sister, but as the architect, the spine. The reason they could coast while calling it legacy? Now, sitting here with my revoked permissions and empty calendar, I finally understand they didn't forget me. They never saw me. Because to forget requires recognition first. And I was never more than a useful assumption. But here's the irony: they thought removing my name from the title would erase my presence. What they don't know is that every foundation they stand on has my initials carved into the concrete, hidden beneath the polish. What they built wasn't a company, it was a stage. And I was the scaffolding. They just never thought I'd step away and let it all fall. The first sign came in the form of a billing discrepancy. A vendor emailed me directly, a company I had personally onboarded 3 years ago, asking why their retainer hadn't been processed. I no longer had access to the finance portal, but I remembered the login path, the routine. I reached out to Rachel casually. "Do you know if the Birchman invoice went through?" She didn't answer the question. Instead, she sent a short reply. "You're no longer on the finance stream. Best to check with Adam." Adam, the same brother who had once needed me to explain what a profit and loss statement was, the same brother who couldn't hold a meeting without veering into metaphors about energy and vibes. That night, I pulled up the last full backup I had made before my access was cut, something I had exported instinctively the week before the board meeting, back when I first sensed the shift. I combed through the documents. There it was, a newly signed operating agreement, filed quietly 1 week before the meeting. Adam listed as Interim Managing Director, Rachel as Head of Culture and Strategy. My position dissolved. No notification, no discussion, no acknowledgement. And then I saw something else, an internal memo draft titled Vision Forward, 2025 and Beyond. It outlined a renewed direction led by next-generation voices, praising adaptive leadership untethered from legacy mindsets. It didn't name me. It didn't need to. I knew the language. I'd written memos just like it for years. The subtext was clear. Remove the past, rebrand it as evolution, and bury the architect beneath the new mission statement. What they didn't expect, though, was that I'd left my own trail. Back in 2019, when we were still using shared drives and insecure templates, I pushed for encrypted audit logs because one contractor had tried to manipulate timestamps. They brushed it off. I implemented it anyway, quietly. And because of that, every document they'd altered, Every permission they'd reassigned, every financial route they'd rerouted was there. Traceable, timed, tied to login credentials. They hadn't just erased me from the org chart. They had actively conspired to cut me out while retaining my intellectual property. The systems I built, the client frameworks I created, the licensing templates I paid to have reviewed, still in use. Only now with different names attached. But the final blow wasn't a memo or a budget line. It came in the form of a paused mortgage payment. My condo, the one I bought outright with my bonus from landing the Paragon account, had a payment delay flagged on my banking app. I hadn't changed anything. But when I checked the file, someone had logged into the joint account I used to route quarterly dividends. Someone had paused the auto transfer, filed under my name, using my credentials. A digital signature that wasn't mine, but close enough to pass unless you looked very closely. It was a forgery. A clean, calculated move likely intended to trigger penalties, maybe even foreclosure. If I hadn't caught it early, I could have lost the property. Or worse, ended up in legal trouble for a default I hadn't authorized. Only 3 people had access to that system: Adam, Rachel, and Dad. I didn't call, I didn't rage. I made a folder. Screenshots, signature samples, login metadata, the internal memo, timestamps, the new org chart, the revised equity agreement, all of it. Then I reached out to Erin. She used to be our corporate counsel before she moved firms. She owed me a favor, or rather, she remembered the way I'd stood by her when the family tried to cut her out during the 2020 budget fight. I sent her everything. She replied in under 10 minutes. "Clara, this is not just exclusion, this is coordinated fraud." No, I remember sitting on the floor that night, back against my kitchen counter, feeling absolutely still, not panicked, not angry, just stunned by the depth. Not that they had moved on, but that they had done so by trying to burn my path behind me. And I would have let them. I might have walked away, quietly, if they'd just had the decency to do it clean. But forgery? That wasn't just betrayal. That was intention. And intention has consequences. The first thing I did was cancel every automated transfer connected to the joint family trust. It was 2:14 a.m. When I submitted the request's quiet clicks in the dark of my apartment, my coffee long cold beside me. I revoked access to my escrow account, flagged the forgery with the bank, and initiated a forensic review of every login under my credentials. The security rep, a woman named Lynn, stayed on the call longer than she needed to. "Do you know who might have done this?" she asked, her voice soft, hesitant. "Yes," I said. "It's a short list." She paused. "We'll escalate it to legal." By sunrise, I'd also locked down the client relationship portal and submitted formal notice to our top 3 accounts. The message was short, sterile, factual. Effective immediately, I am no longer affiliated with Wells and Company. All inquiries may be directed to the new leadership. For documentation or prior agreements, contact me directly. Within hours, one of the clients, Langley Financial, replied, "If you're out, we're reevaluating." That was the first domino. Then I called the lawyer. Not Aaron. A new one. Corporate litigator. Manhattan firm. Someone with no sentimental ties to the family. I sent him the entire archive. 36 documents, 6 voice memos, 12 screenshots. "I'm not looking to destroy them," I said. "Just to protect myself. Fully, legally, financially." He understood. His team began drafting a separation agreement that outlined every shared asset, every liability, every co-owned entity. "You'll need to file for revocation of signature authority," he said, "and initiate a cease and desist on IP use if they continue running your frameworks under their brand." I nodded. I'd already begun compiling the template IDs. 3 days later, I sent the letter. It was printed on cream stock, formally worded, delivered by courier to the Wells and Company office. I didn't address it to any one person. I addressed it to all of them. Effective immediately, Clara Wells has withdrawn from all fiduciary, legal, and operational associations with the Wells Family Trust, including but not limited to all intellectual property, strategy frameworks, and client-facing systems originated between 2015-2023. It ended with a line in bold. Any continued use of proprietary material will be considered a breach of contract and reported accordingly. No, I signed it with my full name, no title. The next day, the calls started. First from Rachel. then Adam, then silence, then a text from Dad. This is not how family handles things. I didn't reply. Because actually, this is exactly how family handles things when the family sees you as a resource, not a person. The following week, I met with a forensic accountant. We combed through every shared asset and determined what could be reclaimed. I discovered something else: multiple instances where family members had used my authorization code to backdate approvals. One was linked to a short-term loan against the company's line of credit, taken out 6 months prior. No disclosure, no repayment. And I was still listed as cosigner. My lawyer added fraud to the list. But none of that shook me as much as the moment I typed the final password into the shutdown console. It was a system I'd built myself, a project dashboard with real-time tracking, reminders, and budget syncing. I watched the interface load one last time, remembered the hours I spent debugging its early versions, remembered staying up through thunderstorms to finish it before a launch. Then I deactivated it. They'd renamed it Wellsview in the rebrand. It wasn't mine anymore. That night I went to a hotel, not because I had to, but because I needed somewhere sterile, somewhere without memories soaked into the walls. I ordered room service, ate alone, let the silence hang like fresh paint. My phone buzzed at 11:42 p.m., unknown number. I didn't answer. 30 seconds later, a text. You're doing this to punish us. I stared at the screen for a full minute before deleting the thread. Number, I wasn't doing this to punish anyone. I was doing this because they thought I wouldn't. Because they assumed I needed the name more than they needed the infrastructure. Because they underestimated what would happen if I ever stopped being quiet. I didn't raise my voice. I just signed the documents. And when I did, everything they built on top of me began to shift. It took exactly 36 hours for the panic to begin. First, a voicemail from Rachel, her tone tight and falsely calm, asking if we could just talk this through before lawyers get involved. Then Adam, calling twice back to back, something he hadn't done since he'd locked himself out of his apartment in college. I ignored both. At 7:03 the next morning, a new notification pinged my inbox, an automated alert from the shared banking app. Multiple failed access attempts detected. They were trying to log in, trying to undo what I'd already removed. I watched the alerts stack like dominoes, each one more frantic than the last. By noon, my father sent a text. We need to meet, today. No greeting, no punctuation. Just those 4 words like an order. I didn't answer. Instead, I took a walk. The sky was flat gray. The wind bit sharp at my collar. I passed a bookstore and went inside. Bought nothing. Just stood in the poetry aisle and let the stillness sink in. That night, I got the group email. It was a Hail Mary masked as diplomacy. Dear Clara, it began, as if we weren't blood, as if they hadn't just tried to strip me of everything I built. We understand emotions are running high. This family has always thrived on unity, and we believe it's still possible to move forward together. Let's reconnect. Let's realign. It ended with a time and date for a reconciliation meeting. They'd booked a conference room, catering included. I didn't respond. The next day, Adam left a voicemail. His voice trembled like he was trying to balance charm and desperation. Clara, come on. This doesn't have to go nuclear. We're family. You don't need to escalate, as if I hadn't already spent years de-escalating, as if silence hadn't been my entire job description. Then came Mom. She showed up outside my building. I saw her from the second-floor window, wrapped in a camel coat she wore to charity luncheons. Her arms crossed, eyes scanning the lobby like a woman waiting for a package. I waited too. 15 minutes. 20. She didn't leave. Eventually, I walked down, buzzed the door, and opened it just enough to block her path. Clara, she said, like my name hurt her mouth. I said nothing. She tried a smile. You've made your point. We understand now. I tilted my head slightly. What do you understand? That maybe we went too far. Maybe things got mishandled. Mishandled. Like I was a file they'd misplaced. She pulled out an envelope from her purse. We had this drafted. A reinstatement agreement. Your title, your shares, everything. Backdated. Clean. I took the envelope. Didn't open it. Just held it for a second. And the forgery? I asked. She flinched. Your father didn't mean... I wasn't talking about Dad. She exhaled. Clara, please. Do you really want this to become a scandal? It's already a scandal, I said softly. You just didn't think I'd be the one to talk. Her jaw set. We built this for you. No, I said. You built this because you didn't think I'd ever leave. My. Then I handed the envelope back, turned, and walked upstairs. She didn't follow. That night, the company's largest vendor pulled out. I heard through a mutual contact. Instability in leadership, they cited. The next morning, 3 clients emailed to request project files be transferred to my new address. I hadn't even announced the firm yet, but word travels fast when the silence breaks. The final straw came quietly. Rachel sent one last text, just 3 words. We were wrong. No emojis. No qualifiers. I didn't reply, because by then the shift had already happened. Not in them, in me. I didn't go to the hearing for revenge. I went because the silence had cost too much. My daughter's trust. My own sense of reality. So I showed up, Saturday straight in the front row. And when my sister entered, all eyes on her sharp blazer and fake confidence, I didn't flinch. Neither did the judge. The courtroom was cold, fluorescent. My lawyer placed the exhibits down like clockwork. Email threads, bank logs, mortgage statements with forged signatures. We're not here to destroy anyone, he said calmly. We're here to correct a theft. The opposing counsel tried to twist it. She's family, he argued. She helped out during a difficult time. There was an understanding. But then the messages came. Screenshots. My texts explicitly instructing the monthly deposits were for my daughter. For textbooks, rent, essentials not to be redirected. The judge narrowed his eyes. And who redirected them? Silence. Then, the sister. That was the moment it shifted. My parents sat 2 rows behind, stone still. My mother's hands clutching her purse like it could explain any of this. My father staring at the floor. My sister's lawyer whispered something. She didn't respond, just kept her jaw tight and eyes forward. A week later, the ruling arrived. Clear, unambiguous. Restitution for misappropriated funds. A court order to vacate the house. Damages for impersonation. The number wasn't small, and the language was sharp. A pattern of deliberate deceit under the guise of familial trust. I read it once, then again, and then I folded it in half and placed it in a drawer. The real weight wasn't in the judgment, it was in what came after. The unraveling. I heard from a mutual friend that my sister tried to sell the car she'd bought with the down payment. No buyers. The bank froze her new account, flagged for investigation. My parents' mortgage, the real one, no longer had my quiet $400 buffer. And with the lawyer fees piling up, they were finally feeling what I had carried for years. They didn't call. But they didn't have to. That kind of silence has a texture. Dense, ashy, like the air before a storm, except now the storm had already come and gone. I stayed quiet, focused on the things that mattered. I moved back into the house, not because I needed to, but because it was mine. I replaced the locks, repainted the bedroom, removed every object they'd left behind, a chipped mug, a broken clock, a half-used bottle of lotion. I threw them away without ceremony, not out of anger, out of necessity. My daughter came over the next weekend. She brought a plant. For the window, she said, placing it gently beside the sink. We made tea. She laughed at the peeling wallpaper in the hallway. I told her we'd fix it together. She nodded and said, Yeah, we will. That night, she stayed over. Not because she had to, but because she could. A few days later, a letter arrived. No return address. Handwritten. Clara, it began. We didn't mean for it to go this far. Families fight. Families forgive. Let's talk. No apology, just an expectation. As if everything could be reset with a dinner or a phone call. I placed the letter on the counter. Let it sit overnight. In the morning, I folded it once and slid it into the recycling bin. Later that week, I filed for a new trust, in my name, for my daughter. Structured, transparent, legal, every dollar accounted for, because I was done building on sand. And I wanted her to know that the ground beneath her would never shift again without warning. Sometimes, I think about how easily I could have missed all of it, if I hadn't asked that one question over Christmas dinner, if I hadn't followed the unease, if I'd chosen silence again. But I didn't. I asked. I waited, and when the truth finally surfaced, I didn't run. I stood still and let it. They thought I was the weak one, but they were the ones who never thought I'd stop being quiet. The first crack in their foundation didn't come from the judgment, it came from within. Word spread faster than they could contain it. Vendors pulled out, citing concerns over ethical leadership. Longtime partners stopped returning emails, and then came the financial audits, quiet requests from oversight boards, a line of questioning they couldn't navigate without the one person who used to handle their messes. Rachel tried. She repurposed old templates I'd written years ago, but documents without context are just paper. Adam panicked. He overpromised deliverables he didn't understand. The investors saw it, the staff whispered, and the rot spread. One afternoon, a former intern reached out. He had been let go abruptly, no severance, no explanation. He remembered I'd once helped him fix a tax issue when HR ignored his emails. "They say the company's restructuring," he wrote, "but honestly, it feels like it's crumbling." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The collapse was already in motion. Then the house went on the market. Not mine, the family one. The one they once said would be passed down generation to generation. Legacy, Dad used to call it, but legacies can't be maintained on pride alone. Without my contributions, the numbers stopped adding up. Property taxes, upkeep, loan repayments. I drove by it once, not to gloat, just to see. The front hedges were overgrown. The mailbox hung loose at the hinge. A single flyer fluttered in the window, available immediately. A few weeks later, Rachel's car was repossessed, publicly, in front of her gym. A neighbor filmed it and posted it on social media. I didn't watch the clip, but I saw the caption, "So much for curated lives." Adam's consulting gig fell through next. Turns out charisma doesn't substitute for credibility, especially not when former clients start asking, "Where's Clara?" As for my parents, the shift was quieter. Dinners out became dinners in. The art auction donations stopped. Their names disappeared from event pamphlets. A slow fade from the circles they once boasted about. It wasn't just money they'd lost. It was the illusion of control, of stability, of being untouchable. And yet, none of them reached out again. Not with real words. Not with remorse. Only things like a forwarded article, "Thought you'd find this interesting," or a birthday message, neutral and clean, "Hope you're well," but hope, when coming from those who once erased you, is not a gift. It's a performance, and I no longer played that role. Meanwhile, I rebuilt. Not in a grand way, quietly, deliberately. I partnered with a firm that valued structure, not surnames. I brought in the clients who still trusted me. I created a small team, lean, efficient, kind. No one asked me to fund their lives. No one assumed access. Every invoice, every credit, every line item was accounted for, and it felt like breathing. I used part of the settlement money to create a scholarship fund, not in my name, in my daughter's, for students who had fallen through the cracks, just like I once had, in a different way. That's what healing looked like. Not revenge, redirection. Sometimes I caught myself thinking about the years I gave them. The birthdays spent working, the calls answered at midnight, the small emergencies I absorbed so they could live without consequence. But I didn't regret it, because those years taught me exactly what I'm worth. And now, they were learning too. Not through punishment, but through absence. Through the echo of a name no longer offered as a solution. Through meetings where no one had the answers I used to deliver without credit. Through late nights without a backup plan. That's the thing about being the person they always called once you stop answering. The silence speaks volumes. They thought removing my title would make me disappear. But titles fade. Names change. The one thing they couldn't erase was the truth. And now, they were finally living in it. I made coffee slowly. For the first time in years, I didn't check my phone while it brewed. The morning light slid through the window in soft slats, catching the edge of the plant my daughter gave me. It had grown. New leaves, a little crooked, but resilient. I thought about repotting it, giving it more space. Maybe I would, this weekend. I had time now. Not the frantic kind I used to carve between emergencies, but real time. Mine. The firm I built had just signed its 4th client. Not the biggest, not flashy, but steady. Honest. I chose them as carefully as they chose me. We worked from a small office, bare walls, strong Wi-Fi, quiet desks, no glossy plaques, no empty titles, just people doing their jobs and doing them well. I never wanted an empire. I wanted integrity, and now, every invoice I sent carried my name with purpose, not obligation. That morning, while reviewing contracts, the mail arrived. A thick envelope slid under the door, cream paper, no return address. My name printed in looping, cautious handwriting. I knew immediately. I opened it slowly. A wedding invitation, Rachel's son. The boy I once babysat during staff calls. He was 20 now. The card was tasteful blue foil, minimalist font, RSVP link. No note. No, we'd love to see you. Just the date, the venue, the assumption. I held the card for a long time, not out of sentiment, just stillness, the kind that visits when you realize how far you've walked. I didn't cry, I didn't feel rage, only distance. That quiet, final kind. I set the invitation on the counter beside the coffee and let it sit there the rest of the day. That evening, I changed the sheets. Forest green, new linen, no permission needed. I lit a candle in the hallway, near the plant. Not for grief, not even for peace, just for stillness. A small glow in the home I had reclaimed, not from them, but from the version of myself who had once believed I had to earn space. My daughter called that night. She had just finished a presentation for her part-time job. She was proud. I could hear it in her voice. "I even quoted you," she said, laughing. "That thing you always said about structure not being the opposite of creativity, but the frame that makes it possible." I smiled. I hadn't remembered saying that, but she had. After we hung up, I thought about the version of me they knew, the one who stayed late, said yes, cleaned up behind the curtains so the show could go on. I wondered if they missed her, if they looked for her in meetings that ran too long, in documents they no longer understood. Maybe. Or maybe they'd simply rewritten the story again, removed my name from the narrative, told themselves I was never really the center, just a useful part, a character with no arc. But I knew better, because now I had the ending, and it didn't need applause. The house they once tried to claim now paid for my daughter's education. The systems they stole now formed the backbone of my own consultancy. Legally protected, elegantly rewritten. The silence they mistook for compliance had become the clearest language I knew. I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I rebuilt. And the strange thing was, they never truly asked why I left. Not in words that mattered, because to ask would mean admitting they knew. And that would mean facing the version of themselves they tried so hard to avoid. The one who took, and only noticed absence when the benefits stopped arriving. I used to think closure required conversation, that to move on, I'd need them to see me. But now I know. Being seen isn't the same as being understood. And neither is necessary for freedom. The invitation stayed on my counter for 4 days. Then, on a quiet Sunday, I picked it up, slid it into the bin, not with anger, not even with defiance, just a single, clean motion, a choice made without weight. That night, I wrote one final note. It wasn't long, just a few lines. I didn't address it to anyone. I wrote it for myself. They thought I would never walk away, but leaving wasn't the hard part. Staying gone, staying whole, that was the decision, and I made it. Then I closed the notebook, blew out the candle, and let the quiet keep me.